Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. And before we get into all of the cool Amazing Spider-Man keys here, just wanted to remind you to join the team and subscribe to the channel. And just at this early stage, it's really important we get as many subscribers as we can. My goal is to kind of get to 1,000 as quickly as possible. So yeah, if you could subscribe to the channel, it would help us out so much. But getting down to business here, I got all my, well, not all of them, but most of my top Amazing Spider-Man keys from the 80s and 90s. And yeah, just before we do start talking about them, there's a lot of great keys from the 70s, obviously. I kind of want to focus more on the CGC 9.8 market in this video. And I mean, we could talk about some ungraded prices as well, but in the 70s, the CGC 9.8s get so expensive, and there's only, 5 or 10 of them on some issues. And, I know like Amazing Spider-Man 129, First Punisher is an awesome key. First Gwen Stacy is another key that comes to mind that's really hot. Even 194 you can find, and that's the CGC 9.8 First Black Cat, but that's going to put you over $2,000. American usually. So, kind of wanted to stay in the 80s, a little bit more affordable, and some of the issues I know a little bit more about. So yeah, there's definitely other key issues in Amazing Spider-Man that you could certainly buy out there that I won't really talk about too much today. So we'll just kind of stick to the CGC 9.8s from the 80s and 90s, and we'll get into it here. So, Amazing Spider-Man 252, I think this is a really good investment, a really good key to add to your collection. If you wanted to go in the 9.8, I think that's a good way to go if that kind of matches your budget. But 252, you get sort of tied for the first black costume appearance, and also an Amazing Fantasy cover swap. And yeah, these cover homages and cover swaps, they're sort of over time becoming a lot more popular. And something I thought that would never happen are like, the anniversary cover swaps and of the original Amazing Fantasies and some of the other issues, Action 1 and stuff like that. Those in the 9.8 white pages are getting up there in price, like almost becoming more than, an Amazing Spider-Man 298. It's sort of getting into that price, which I never thought would happen. Personally, I don't like those, exact cover swipes that are just reprints and remakes, and like, I think they did them in like the early thousands, some of them. I personally don't like those type of cover swipes, but I do like cover homages where they sort of do their own thing. So 252 is the cover swipe of Amazing Fantasy 15, First Spider-Man. You got the first black costume in this one, so there is like that sort of tangible first appearance for possibly buying this comic. Just looking at the CGC census, 11.7% of all graded copies are 9.8s. That's a pretty favorable ratio. I think with all Spider-Man, what's sort of good about them is they were so popular and so handled that they're pretty hard to find in the 9.8s comparatively. Whereas, Batman from the 80s, this one being that 11.7%, a lot of Batman comics from the 80s, they're, 20-30% of them are 9.8s. Basically because they were a little bit less popular, a little bit less traded, a little bit less handled, so they're in better shape overall, relatively. So Spider-Man, though, very popular, always has been, a little more handled, well traded. So you're getting, they're more rare in the 9.8. So that's why a lot of times too, Amazing Spider-Mans are a little bit more expensive. So this also on the census, there's 1,099 of these in the blue label. So a lot of those are not white pages too. So if you got a CGC 9.8 white pages, you're probably looking at like a 1 of 1,000 collector item, which is pretty cool. And yeah, again, you're getting the cover homage. I think that could kind of be a catalyst for this to continue to do well over time. Yeah, Amazing Fantasy 15, First Spider-Man, that is like pretty much in a huge bubble right now, I would say. It's just so popular, the prices just keep going up, keep going up. And this is, I think, is a good way to kind of play that. because you're getting the cover homage. And prices on this one, purchased this last year for about a little over 500 US. Bought it on an auction. Got pretty lucky too, because I bought it in the US on a 1-week auction, and it was shipped over, and I didn't have to pay any border fees, which was kind of nice. And a lot of times you see this issue for that's like into the sort of 700-800 level for buy it nows. So to grab one for like a little over 500, I thought was a decent deal. It's, you know, I'm sure there's a better deal out there. Every now and then you might see one go for a little bit less, but 9.8 white pages, 252 for about 500 US, I think was a really good deal. So yeah, definitely a key issue from the 80s in Spider-Man that you definitely need. So really quick, I'll go over number 300, because I've done it a couple times in some of my other videos. Amazing Spider-Man 300, this is the last black costume. You get the origin and first full appearance of Venom. And obviously like the classic Todd Mcfarlane cover. So this is one of the most expensive issue here, and one of the more expensive issues that you could buy from the 80s, maybe the most expensive in the 9.8. And the reason for that, it's basically 6% of all graded copies are 9.8s, which is a very, very low ratio for an 80s comic. And it's one of the lower ratios I've ever seen for an 80s comic. Yeah, a lot of times 1980s comics, the ratio is like 20, 30, 40% sometimes. Anything under 20 is getting, you know, you're getting pretty relatively rare in the 9.8s, but 6% is very low, very rare, and that's why this issue is so much money. Yeah, again, 6% of these 940 graded 9.8s on the census, and some of those wouldn't be white pages, so you know you're looking at a little under 900, I would say, for 9.8 white pages. One of 900 collection item, which is really nice. And yeah, you know what, if there's one issue that you wanted to buy from Amazing Spider-Man from this era, and you were kind of dead set on it being somewhat of an investment, this is probably the issue that you want to buy. It sells so well. You know, there's only 900 of them in the world. Amazing Spider-Man 300, first Venom, you're getting that sort of tangible first appearance. And I mean, it is really popular. It's kind of reflected in the price. I saw one of these go, it was like last week or a week, at kind of a 1-week fire sale auction. It went for 1,900. And earlier this year I saw two in the new label just kind of pop up on the internet. Again, a 1-week fire sale auction for both of them, and they went for 2,000 US in the new case, and those ones were looking pretty good. Yeah, the one that went for like 1,900 kind of had some like centering issues. The pages were really sticking out here, and the colors didn't pop that well. But so for a really, really good 300 9.8 white pages, you're looking at least $2,000. And you know, buy it nows on the internet. The ones where the colors like just pop really good, really nice centering. People are asking for like 2,500, 2,600 buy it nows for this issue too. So that's sort of your range of price. If you can find like a weekly auction, get it for 2,000, I think that's going to be a really good deal. Find a nice copy for 2,000. And yeah, if you really want a really nice issue with popping colors, perfect centering, and you don't want to wait, you might have to pay up kind of in the 2,500 range. But yeah, I mean, if there was one issue and you were kind of serious about thinking about it as more of an investment than a collector item, I think issue 300 is the one to get. So next up here, one of my favorite issues ever is Amazing Spider-Man 2.98. This is the first Todd Mcfarlane Spider-Man, and the first appearance of Eddie Brock in cameo as well. It's got a really cool white cover. Yeah, the story with me with this issue was, you know, back when I was 8 or 9, just loving Todd McFarlane, you know, getting right into when Spawn came out, sort of, and looking back at some of the Spider-Man issues he did, I didn't really have enough money to buy like issue 300 or Even like 316, the Venom cover, like I remember it was so popular back then. It had almost just came out, and that was really popular. So I ended up buying a 298 for like 20 bucks, I think it was, which was like a lot of money to me back then. And it was like my most prized possession in the early 90s. So I do have a big nostalgic connection to this issue. But, you know, it's got the white cover, so it's quite hard to find in a high grade. So, yeah, looking at the CGC census here, 12% of all copies are 9.8s. So 12% of all CGC graded copies are 9.8s. And there's 615 of these out there. And some of them probably not 9.8 white pages, some of them not white pages probably. So yeah, you're looking at about a 1 of 600 item here. And that's pretty cool. I think I thought there would be more than them personally. You know, first cameo of Eddie Brock, first Todd Mcfarlane Spider-Man. I mean, it definitely is a key issue. Maybe one key issue that some people don't think about as much with Amazing Spider-Man, but I know it's one that I've always loved since I was a kid. And yeah, the white cover, it's really tough to find in a high grade. Like almost all the rough copies I've ever seen of this issue just weren't even close to 9.8s. There's always something, always some nicks on the spine, or you just notice something on the white cover. So I think this is a really cool one as well to get in the 9.8s. And more affordable too. You're looking at, for an Amazing Spider-Man 298 and the 9.8 white pages, you know, anywhere from like 250 to 300, depending on sort of how lucky you are and how popular the auction is on eBay. Yeah, 9.8 white pages. Saw a really nice one go last year, late last year it probably was. And it was, I think it went for like 275 American. I've seen them go for like 290 in auction. Buy it nows will get into 300 American, 350 maybe, maybe even 400 for like a top buy it now. Because yeah, there's not really a lot of these, so I think at times some people are trying to get rid of them for that sort of 350, 400 level. Being that, you know, only 610 in the world, it's not one that's like popping up on eBay all the time. Yeah, like actually kind of a good segue into the first Carnage comic, because there's a ton of those. So yeah, I mean, as a comparison, only 600 or so of these, but the Amazing Spider-Man 361 First Carnage, there are 2,915 of these in the blue label. So a lot more. Yeah, what was the percentage? And 27% of all graded copies are 9.8s. So yeah, you can kind of see the difference from the 80s to the 90s. Especially this, like 1991, 1992 was pretty much like the peak. This one being made in 92. It's like the peak of comic printing and even like sport card printing and stuff. So, you know, a lot of sport cards that were made around there aren't really worth that much. Unless they're like really, really, really high grade. So that's kind of what's going on with this issue. It's, you know, there's so many, so on eBay they're always popping up. They're quite well circled, pretty easy to find. And yeah, again, what is it, 2,915 of these compared to, you know, Amazing Spider-Man 300, there's 940. Amazing Spider-Man 298, there's 615 of them. So even combined, the two, there's not even as many 9.8s as 361. So this issue, pretty easy to find. You know, you can certainly, I think, afford to, you know, wait and not overpay if you see an auction for one of these. Yeah, and prices for Amazing Spider-Man 361 First Carnage in the 9.8s, you're looking at sort of like $350 to $400. Last year when the Venom movie came out, you started seeing them getting up to like $450, $500 even. Some of the newsstand ones were even pushing that $500. I think a couple even went over the $500 US range for a newsstand edition. This one is a direct edition. Yeah, and I think in the environment now, you're probably not gonna you're gonna be able to get one of these for about $400. You know, maybe a newsstand or maybe a direct edition in the 9.8 from not a very well known seller on eBay, maybe a 1-week auction. You might be able to grab it for like $3.50 in the 9.8 white pages, but it's really popular. And I think, yeah, with this issue, you're less buying because it's like rare, or it's like, you know, rare on the census, because it's not. It's actually easy to find. You're more buying this just because Carnage is really popular. And yeah, I mean, right now, kind of in between the two Venom movies, and the second Venom movie is going to have Carnage in it with Woody Harrelson playing. So yeah, you know what? I think actually right now you're sort of in between the movies. Yeah, there's just been some announcements online, kind of saying that Venom 2 is going to happen, and you know, Carnage is going to be. Which, I mean, there was an end scene with Carnage in the first Venom, so everyone kind of knew that. It wasn't really news. So yeah, I think before that hype train for Venom 2 picks up, which I'm sure will be probably late next year, if you can find a couple of these at a good deal, and you know, maybe into the movie next year you could sell 1 or 2 of them at a better price, that might be a decent strategy. And again, pretty easy to find, so you know, I wouldn't rush to like overpay on an auction or anything. Just wait. You know, this one especially is perfectly centered. Good story on this one. I actually had this one, 361, 362, and 363. I purchased on eBay as ungraded copies, and the seller was like, I bought these on the first day, and I put them in packages, and there's mint, and blah blah blah. So I bought them, paid up quite a bit for them, and yeah, they were so nice. Like, I honestly thought they could be 9.9s possibly, because literally I believed him when I saw them. They are absolutely crisp. Super white pages, super flat. You could literally tell he did buy them on the first day, put them in packages, and like stored them for 30 years. And yeah, they did end up coming back 9.8 white pages, which was nice. And then, yeah, this one's perfectly flat, perfectly centered. A wonderful issue. Some of them aren't so centered, and you know, you might be able to get a better price if those things don't really matter to you. A lot of times when I buy a 9.8, those things sort of bug me a little bit, so I like to have a nice centered spine on mine. So yeah, I was pretty lucky for these to all come back 9.8s, but I was kind of hoping for a 9.9, which is unrealistic, but it didn't happen. That's okay though. So first Carnage, and my last key from the 80s. You know, Carnage being in the 90s, so 80s and 90s. Somewhat affordable, I would say, these ones, for 9.8s. So, Amazing Spider-Man 238 and the 9.8s. This one is a white page. First appearance of Hobgoblin. This one has the tattoos in them too. So yeah, I would say this issue is sort of second in line to Amazing Spider-Man 300, if you're like really serious about kind of like a collector investment item. So with this issue, you're getting the first Hobgoblin. This one does have the tattoos in them, and I think you'd want to go that way if you're getting the 9.8s. You know, certainly if you're buying like even an ungraded copy, I would probably go with, you know, you want to get the tattoos. It's just one of those like weird things where collectors, they like to just have that full finished book with the tattoos. So yeah, checking out the CGC census on this one, it is relatively rare. So 8.6% of all graded copies are 9.8s, and you know, anything under 10% in the 80s is really rare. So yeah, this, for that reason, is kind of an investment grade book, I would say. Relatively very rare compared to other 1980s books, and you get an iconic first appearance. Yeah, like you get John Romita Jr. and Sr. cover art too. So this is kind of winding down where John Romita Sr. and Jr. were doing covers together. So that's another kind of cool reason that this book is very cool. And also, like in the white pages, a lot of them are off-white to white pages. So like, what is it on the census? There are 377 of these in the blue label on the CGC census. And I would say probably 15% of those are not white pages. The 15% are probably off-white to white. So yeah, you're almost getting like a 1 in 300 item here. So And this one, yeah, it kind of surprises on, there seems to be quite a bit of them on eBay. And yeah, it seems, even though this issue is quite rare, and the census really shows that it's kind of an investment grade book, there still seems to be quite a lot for sale. So it might not be the most popular book, and that could be kind of a good thing right now. There's definitely no like Hobgoblin movie, or Hobgoblin's not really in pop culture for any reason. And usually that's actually the kind of environment where you do want to buy. If there's a new movie of whatever character out and you go and buy the first appearance, you're almost guaranteed to get an inflated price. And over time that price will come back down to a more even price once that character gets out of pop culture. So yeah, you know what, I think First Hobgoblin right now is a really good buy because there's just nothing going on with Hobgoblin, and it's still such a cool character overall. And how rare it is on the census is just another awesome reason to want to buy this. And talking about prices, I saw a few, I guess in the last 6 months, 1 or 2 of them on auction. I think one sold, it was actually under $1,000 in the 9.8 white pages we're talking here. Under $1,000, and I mean that's a really good deal. Generally these are going for about $1,000 US in a fire sale auction, and in a buy it now situation people are trying to get like 1,400-ish, 1,500 even, some of them. And yeah, this copy is a really good copy. I ended up paying about 1,100 and something, forget the exact number. And it was on an auction too, so it was a bit of an overpay I think for an auction. Kind of seeing some auctions since then going for about $100-$150 less. But the one thing with this issue is the colors just pop. For a 1983 issue, it's white pages for sure. Super crisp, super flat, perfectly centered. Yeah, this is really like a perfect 238. And yeah, lots of reasons to grab this issue right now. I think it's kind of, I think, in a sweet spot. No hype. Great, looks great on the CGC census, and if you can find one for less than $1,000, I think this is like a really good sort of serious collection item. Alright, so yeah, these are my most of my CGC 9.8s in Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, some others I thought about bringing out. Amazing Spider-Man 316 9.8, first Venom cover. That's one that I do have, really cool. Yeah, there's a couple like from that whole McFarlane range that aren't really keys but are really cool, and I mean just kind of depending on what cover you like. And like Amazing Spider-Man 194 first Black Cat, that in the 9.8s is like I think it's, I've always seen it over $2,000 US. It's really rare. I didn't look at the census for that, but I would imagine it's probably the percentage ratios are probably similar to the Hobgoblin and Amazing Spider-Man 300. But yeah, once you get into those books in the 70s, for most people's budget, you're going to be buying non-graded books. And that's what I always say out there. Some of my videos I try to express it, that personally me, I was born in 1985, so all the books that I really like are from the 1980s and 1990s. Otherwise, if you're going to invest in comic books, usually the best way to invest is just to buy like 70s and 60s first appearances, just in non-graded issues. I think that's probably the best way to invest in comics. Now, personally, I don't do that because I don't really have like a nostalgic connection to those issues. Like I don't really remember any books from the 70s when I was young, because I was too young, and I was just right into Todd Mcfarlane and Spawn and the cool Spider-Mans and stuff like that. And I always loved Hobgoblin from when I was a kid too. So yeah, in the 80s and 90s, I always recommend to buy 9.8 white pages books if your budget permits. These are the ones that the collectors are just going to lust after and really want in 10, 20 years. The ones that are going to be really rare. Some of them are 1 of 600, 1 of 300 items, and that's a pretty good collection item, like a limited collection edition over time. Yeah, and then, you know, when you get into the 70s for like first Punisher, 9.8s, there's just only a couple of them and they just become super unaffordable. And in that range, I think you could buy nice ungraded copies for decent prices, and then that would be a really good way to invest in comics. And that is probably the best way to invest in comics. Whereas my way is sort of tailored to me because I want to have all those 80s and 90s issues. And just from some of the stuff I've read, a lot of it from the Overstreet price guide, where a lot of the Overstreet advisors talk about how their year went before the price guide. There's about 50 pages each Overstreet price guide where they talk about the comic book market. And that's sort of where I got my ideas of buying 9.8s rather than, you know, two 9.4s and a 9.6 or whatever it might be. Most people in those books sort of say, hey, it's better to just buy the 9.8 than, you know, a couple 9.2s and a 9.4, because, again, as far as collection items, collectors like when, you know, you're getting a 1 of 300 or a 1 of 600 item, whereas, you know, the 9.2s and the 9.4s, there's usually a lot more of them, and because there's all the, you know, because if you buy a 9.2, there's 9.4s, 9.6s, and 9.8s that are in better shape. Most serious collectors don't really even want those, so they're going to go towards the 9.8s, and I think over time that's just going to continue to, there'll be more room in prices between the 9.8s and everything else below. And again, always just talking here about like 80s and 90s comics. So yeah, thanks guys, just blabbering on here I guess, but so glad I could show you my Amazing Spider-Man collection. These are the issues that I grew up loving, and yeah, pretty lucky, super lucky enough to be able to buy all of my favorite key issues in the 9.8, and they're pretty awesome collector and investment items too, so I would recommend pretty much buying any of these because the pride of ownership is awesome, and, you know, don't be patient, don't rush and you know, overpay. If you don't do that, you know, you're going to get a good price, and I bet if you end up holding on to these for like 10 or 15 years, you'll probably end up being able to sell it for more down the line. So thanks a lot guys for watching the video. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel. And I got my whole collection here, a lot more ideas to talk about on camera. My goal right now is to sort of do 4 or 5 videos a week, and also working on getting a live kind of podcast going once a week too, so watch out for that. But yeah, if you haven't, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching guys. I'll see you on the next video.